Alien lords bet their slave girl. Then the human did the impossible HFY story. The metal gates creaked open slowly. The crowd of aliens in the giant arena grew quiet for a moment, then burst into laughter. A single human man walked through the gate, his body covered in bruises and blood. He was limping, one hand holding his side, the other clenched tightly. "Is that the fighter?" One alien shouted. "He looks half dead already." Others laughed, throwing food and coins at him from the stands. The arena was known for deadly fights. Gladiators battled to the death while rich aliens placed their bets. And today, the bets were high, not just for money, but something more. One of the wealthiest nobles in the crowd, Lord Verax, stood up with a proud smirk. "I'll bet everything," he declared loudly. "My ship, my mind's end, even my personal slave." Gasps filled the arena. All eyes turned to the girl standing behind him, an alien slave with soft blue skin, silver eyes, and long black hair. She was dressed in silken robes and held by energy chains. She looked calm, but her eyes locked onto the human entering the arena. Her gaze narrowed. The announcer's voice echoed across the arena. Today's match: the champion of Clan Cravel versus a wounded human from Earth. The alien champion stomped into the arena from the opposite side. He was massive, 7 feet tall, with green-scaled armor growing from his skin. He roared, lifting his weapon, a spiked blade as long as his arm. The crowd cheered, believing the fight was already over before it began, but the human didn't even flinch. He slowly took off his torn coat and tossed it aside. Scars covered his chest, burns, cuts, and old battle wounds. The alien slave girl stared harder, her lips parted slightly. Something about this human felt familiar. The bell rang. The alien champion charged with a roar. The crowd held its breath, expecting the human to be crushed instantly. But at the last moment, the human dodged. His movement was slow but precise. The champion stumbled slightly. Surprised, the human struck back with a single punch, just one, and it made the giant stumble back. Now the laughter in the crowd faded, replaced by murmurs. The girl's chains glowed faintly for a second. No one noticed except her, she whispered softly to herself. "That stance, it's ancient." She looked around, making sure no one heard her. Lord Verax saw the human's small success and growled, "Lucky hit, nothing more." But the girl was no longer watching the fight like the others. She was watching carefully, like she was studying. The human, the champion, swung again, this time hitting the human in the ribs. The human fell to one knee, coughing blood. The crowd cheered again, thinking it was over, but the girl didn't cheer. Instead, she whispered, "Why does he not fear death?" The human stood back up, slowly, like a mountain rising. He wiped the blood from his mouth and said nothing. He looked at the champion, calm, quiet, cold. Then he moved again, striking low, then high, then spinning with perfect control. The champion roared in pain, his leg cut and bleeding. The crowd was silent now, unsure what they were seeing. Even the announcer paused before speaking again. What is this? The human is fighting back." Lord Verax gritted his teeth. Impossible. This human should be dead already. The girl closed her eyes, whispering, "No. He's one of them." She opened her eyes again and leaned forward slightly. Long ago, her mother had told her stories. Forgotten stories about the humans, stories of warriors who didn't die easily, who fought like ghosts, who could turn even hopeless battles into victory. The human landed another strike, this time cutting the champion's shoulder. The giant alien roared in pain and fury, slashing wildly. The human dodged again, slower than before, but still in control. The girl's chains glowed again, brighter this time. She looked down at her wrists, surprised. Something strange was happening. Suddenly, during the fight, The human turned slightly and glanced at her. Their eyes met. It was just a second, but she felt it deeply, as if he saw her soul. And then he nodded. Just a small nod, her breath caught in her throat. She whispered, "He knows who I am." The crowd hadn't seen it, but she did. And at that moment, she knew this was not just a battle. This was something more. Something ancient waking up again. Something the galaxy had long forgotten. And as the human prepared to strike again, the girl whispered in fear and awe, "He's not normal." The alien champion growled, his claws dripping with his own blood. He had never faced such resistance before, not from any species, and certainly not from a wounded human. The crowd remained silent. Thousands of eyes fixed on the dusty arena floor where something strange was happening. The human should have fallen long ago, but he was still standing, chest rising and falling, eyes sharp and calm like a hunter. Lord Verax slammed his fist on the railing above, furious and confused. "This isn't possible." He spat. "He's broken. He's human." The champion attacked again, this time with full rage, no technique, only raw power. He roared as he lifted his heavy, spiked blade, bringing it down like a mountain falling from the sky. But the human didn't move away. He moved forward, stepping into the attack. The crowd gasped as the two bodies collided in. In a blink, the human twisted, ducked, and slammed his fist into the champion's gut. Not once, but twice. It was like hitting a wall. Yet the sound of air bursting from the champion's mouth filled the arena. He staggered, weapon dropping slightly, legs bending. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't blink. They were watching a ghost feed a man who should have been dead, now bringing down a monster with nothing but fists and fire in his eyes. The slave girl watched everything, her silver eyes wide with something between fear and memory. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "That movement. It's from the old Earth schools." But those were myths. She looked down at her hands. Again, the chains still glowing, stronger now, as if reacting to something deep within her. Lord Verax noticed her unease. "You, girl. What are you muttering about?" She looked up, hiding her thoughts, but her heart was racing. Because the moment she saw the human step into danger instead of away from it, something inside her shifted. She had seen this before long ago, in a dream passed down through blood. Through her mother's voice, her mother had once said, "If you ever see a man walk toward death with no fear, follow him, for he carries the flame of forgotten kings." The champion shook his head, furious. Humiliated, he roared and charged again. Faster this time, blood flying from his arms. He grabbed the human and slammed him into the ground. Lifting him by the throat and raising him high, the human didn't fight it. He just looked down at the alien with tired eyes, full of silence and fire. Then his hand moved slow, steady, grabbing the alien's wrist, and with a sudden twist, the champion's arm cracked. The scream echoed across the sky. The human dropped to his feet again, face covered in dust and sweat, and then, with a deep breath, he moved faster than anyone had seen before. His punch struck the champion's chest. Then a knee to the stomach, followed by a spinning elbow to the face. The giant fell. Not all the way, but he staggered to one knee. A sound rippled through the crowd, like confused awe. This wasn't how the fight was supposed to go. This wasn't what they bet on. The slave girl stood up now, without realizing it, her body trembling. The chains on her wrists cracked softly, tiny sparks flying. The energy keeping her bound was reacting to something ancient. She looked at the human again, really looked this time. His scars weren't just battle marks, they were old symbols, ones carved into warriors of the first flame. A forbidden symbol pulsed near his collarbone, barely visible beneath the blood, and when she saw it, her legs grew weak. That mark had only been spoken of in legend. It belonged to humans who once ruled stars with their bare hands. She whispered, "He's one of them." Lord Verax heard her, and this time he did not mock her. His eyes narrowed as he leaned closer. One of what? But she did not answer. Down in the arena, the champion let out a final scream and rushed forward one last time. The human didn't run, didn't block, didn't even raise his fists. He just stood still, and then he stepped forward like he had done before, with perfect timing. He sidestepped the beast and punched upward into the throat. The alien choked mid-charge and dropped to the ground, coughing blood, crawling on hands and knees. The fight was over, but no one cheered, no one spoke. All that remained was the sound of the slave girl's chains falling to the ground with a sharp clang. She had not broken them, they had broken themselves. "Okay." And as she stepped toward the railing, breathless and pale, the human below turned and looked at her again. No smile, no words, just a knowing look, like he had come here not just to fight, but for her and she. She suddenly feared what would happen next more than anything else. Thunder rolled in the distance, though there were no clouds in the sky. The arena still stood in silence. As if no one dared to breathe after what had just happened, the champion lay defeated, coughing and unconscious, while the human stood above him, quiet, not celebrating, not moving. Then he turned and began walking toward the gate he had entered from, his steps slow, body shaking slightly with each move. The slave girl watched every step, her hands free now, wrists marked by the energy. Cuffs that had held her for years, she didn't know how they broke. She didn't understand why they chose this moment. But something deep in her bones whispered a truth she didn't want to hear. That human was not just a fighter. He was something older, something buried, and he had come for something more than victory. She stepped away from Lord Verax's platform. Unnoticed by the stunned guards, the crowd still didn't know whether to cheer, flee, or fall to their knees. She didn't care. She had to see him up close. She had to ask. She had to know if the impossible was true, down the narrow hallway behind the arena floor. The human leaned against a wall, blood dripping from his fingers. He wasn't resting, he was listening. Footsteps echoed softly, light but cautious. He looked up as she turned the corner and saw him clearly for the first time without chains or distance between them. He didn't speak, but she saw it in his eyes. Recognition, "You're hurt." She said quietly. He nodded once, still silent. "You knew the chains would break," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Again, he didn't answer. But there was no denial in his eyes. She stepped closer. "Just a few feet away now. You were trained, weren't you?" She asked, voice shaking, trained by one of the old Order's Earth's lost warriors. The man looked away, jaw tightening, as if memories rose behind his eyes like fire. She knew that silence. It was not the silence of shame. It was the silence of someone who had survived too much to waste words. "My mother once told me stories," she continued, eyes locked on him, "of humans who fought wars with their hands and hearts, who didn't fear death, who vanished before my time." Her voice dropped lower. She said if I ever saw one, I'd feel it in my chest, like thunder rolling through my blood. The human stood straighter now, wincing from his wounds, but not breaking, and then, finally, he spoke. Just one word. "Name." She blinked, confused. "My name?" He nodded. She hesitated, then answered softly. "Neva." He looked at her carefully, eyes sharp and heavy with thought. "You were born on Threx Prime," he said, voice low, rough. "But your bloodline traces to the temple keepers of Eltri." Her mouth fell open, heart pounding. That's not possible. No one knows that, not even I." "I know," he said simply, then started walking past her. She turned quickly, following. "You knew me before today." He didn't stop, but he did answer. "No." "Then how do you know my bloodline?" The human finally paused again at the edge of a dark doorway. He placed a hand on the wall, where a small carved marking glowed under his touch. One she hadn't seen before, a symbol from ancient times. From before the galaxy fell into the hands of traitors, warlords, and slavers. The chains broke because you were never meant to wear them, he said without looking back. The moment I stepped into that ring, your path changed. But why? She asked, voice trembling. Why me? He stepped through the doorway, into the shadows, and spoke one last time before disappearing. Because you're not a slave, he said. You're the key. And then he was gone, swallowed by darkness. Neva stood alone in the hallway, legs shaking, breath caught in her chest. All her life she had been told she was nothing more than property, an object with soft skin and silent lips. But in one fight, one look, one word, everything had changed. The galaxy had moved slightly, and somewhere deep inside her, something was waking up. She didn't know what he meant, not yet. But she knew this. The wounded human was not just a fighter. He was a storm, and she was already caught in it. The night after the fight felt wrong. The air outside the arena was heavy and still, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. Guards searched the tunnels in silence, not shouting, not speaking, only looking for the human who had vanished. But deep below the arena floor, in tunnels long forgotten, by the builders, the human stood still. His hand pressed against a glowing wall. The symbol under his fingers burned softly. Golden light pulsing like a heartbeat. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly. Something behind this wall was locked, something waiting. Above, Neva stood alone on the noble's platform where she had once been displayed like a prize. No guards dared stop her now. They didn't know what to do. She had been a slave an hour ago. The chains were gone, and no one knew who owned her anymore, but she didn't care. She wasn't thinking about ownership or titles. She was thinking about him, the human who had fought with wounds, with silence, with fire, and had disappeared with a single word: key. She didn't know what it meant, but she felt it pulling at her chest. Like invisible strings guiding her feet, she stepped down from the platform and began walking without knowing where she was going. Guards moved aside, confused, whispering. Behind her, no one touched her. Something about her eyes made them step back. The night grew colder as she walked deeper into the old sections of the arena, where walls were cracked and lights flickered weakly. Then she saw something strange, a trail of red thin drops of blood on the floor. Still fresh, her heart jumped. She followed it, carefully, silently. It led her to a doorway made of old stone. Almost forgotten, behind a broken gate, there was no lock, but there was a symbol etched above the door. One that made her gasp. It was the same mark that had glowed under the human skin. The same mark her mother had once drawn in the sand and warned her never to repeat. She stepped inside, and the air changed. It smelled like dust and lightning, like something old and alive. The tunnel twisted. And soon she saw him. He was kneeling in front of a wall covered in carvings, one hand touching the surface, the other resting on his knee. She didn't speak, but he spoke first. "You followed me?" She nodded, though he couldn't see. "You said I'm the key," she said softly, "but I don't know what that means." He finally turned his head, looking at her with tired but sharp eyes. "It means something inside you is locked," he said, "and I need you to open it." She took a step closer, afraid but drawn forward anyway. "What is this place?" "Buried knowledge," he answered, "before the galaxy forgot, before humans became myths." He stood up slowly, his wounds clearly hurting, but still he moved with quiet power. He placed his hand near hers on the wall, and the symbols on the stone lit up first around his palm. Then slowly around hers, the wall began to hum. It was deep and low, Like the sound of a giant creature breathing in its sleep, Neva felt her heart speed up, her fingertips tingling. Then suddenly, a section of the wall cracked down the middle and began to open inward. Light spilled out bright and gold, but soft like moonlight. Inside was a chamber filled with old armor, broken weapons, and glowing stones arranged in circles on the floor. She stepped in behind him, mouth slightly open. "This is a tomb?" she whispered. "No," he said quietly. "This is a seed." He walked to the center, where a large silver box rested, covered in dust. He wiped it off and opened it slowly, revealing a single small item, old, worn badge. It looked simple, but when he picked it up, Neva felt something in her chest. "Twist. What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling. He held it up to the light. "It's the sign of the first human commander," he said. "He was the last to wear it before the fall. And you?" She asked, "What are you then?" He looked at her for a long moment, then placed the badge gently on the floor between them. "I'm the one who came to wake the past," he said, "but I can't do it alone." The room grew quiet again, but the light didn't fade. Instead, it pulsed brighter. Reacting to her presence, the stones around the circle lit up one by one. Following her steps as she moved toward the center, she felt something breaking inside her, not pain, but a lock coming undone. Her hands shook. Her breath caught, and then, without warning, she fell to her knees. Energy burst around her, golden waves racing along the floor and walls. The human shielded his eyes but didn't move. He had seen this before, long ago, in another girl. On another planet, when it finally stopped, Neva looked up at him with glowing eyes. Her voice no longer afraid. "I remember now," she said. "I know what I am." He stepped forward slowly, watching her with quiet awe. "And what are you?" he asked. She stood up, light still swirling around her skin. "I'm not a slave," she whispered. "I'm a guardian, and for the first time." The human smiled, not because the battle was over, but because the real war was about to begin. The night sky above the arena cracked with strange lightning. Though there were no clouds, no rain, no wind. People in the city below looked up in silence, their hands trembling, unsure whether to run or pray. They didn't know that deep underground, beneath their feet, two forgotten forces had just awakened something ancient. The human stood quietly in the golden light of the hidden chamber. His eyes locked on the girl who now glowed like a rising star. She had been a slave for as long as anyone could remember, soft-spoken, silent, invisible. But now, she stood tall, her voice strong, her skin lit with golden threads like lightning caught in glass. She remembered things she had never learned. She knew languages she had never spoken. She understood weapons she had never touched, and she was scared, but she didn't step back. He watched her without interrupting, letting her stand in that strange power. "You're changing," he finally said. "No," she replied softly. "I'm returning." The ground shook faintly beneath them, the stones vibrating with each heartbeat. Then she suddenly gasped, clutched her head, and stumbled forward. Visions flooded her, images of war, of fire raining from the skies, of humans fighting beside alien allies with weapons that lit up the stars. She saw herself in those memories, though her body was different, her name forgotten. "I've lived before," she whispered, falling to her knees again. "I died. But I didn't vanish." He knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder gently. "Your blood remembers," he said. "It was never about who you are today, it's about who you've always been." She looked up at him, tears in her glowing eyes. "Why me? Why now?" He sighed, his face tired, like someone who had walked through fire too many times. "Because they're waking up too," he said. "The others? What others?" He stood slowly, walking to the edge of the chamber where another wall glowed with unreadable markings. "Old enemies," he said. They think humanity is gone. Broken. Scattered. He looked back at her. They've started hunting the bloodlines again. Her stomach twisted. You mean there are more like me? He nodded. Not many, he said. But yes, hidden, sleeping, waiting, and you. She asked, voice small, what are you in all of this? He stared at the glowing badge on the floor. I was just a soldier once, he said. But now I'm the one lighting the fire again, above them. Alarms suddenly echoed through the tunnel's red sirens flashing. Voices shouting in distant corners of the arena. Lord Varix had noticed her missing, and now his guards were coming. They had orders capture the human, chain the girl again, silence everything. But when the first soldier entered the tunnel, something stopped him cold. The girl stepped out of the chamber, golden light still dancing around her skin. Her bare feet touching the floor like it belonged to her. The soldier raised his weapon. Hand shaking, stay back, he warned. She looked at him calmly. No, she said, you stay back. Her voice echoed strangely, as if two voices spoke at once, hers and someone ancient. The lights above the tunnel flickered, exploded, then died completely. The next group of guards rushed in behind the first, confused in the dark, and then the human stepped forward, standing next to the girl. He didn't raise a weapon, didn't speak, but the fear in the guards' faces was real. They didn't know why their hands shook, why their knees weakened. Something primal inside them screamed, one thing, don't fight him. But orders were orders, and they came anyway. The human moved first, his hands like steel, his body a blur. Despite the blood and wounds, the guards fell one by one, not dead, but broken, stunned, terrified. And the girl didn't run. She raised her hand once, and the remaining guards were pushed back by invisible force. Sliding across the floor like leaves in a storm, she didn't know how she did it. She didn't care. He looked at her as they stood in silence again, surrounded by fallen soldiers and shattered lights. You chose to stand, he said. I had. Too, she replied, for myself. And then she looked at him with something new in her eyes. Also. For you outside, the noble houses were already whispering. The human had not only survived, he had changed something that should never change. A slave girl was now a threat. The bets placed earlier that day had created a storm none of them could contain, and far beyond the city, in dark chambers and cold space stations. Others were watching too, watching her, waiting for her to rise fully, or fall before she could. But neither of them knew that yet. For now, the girl and the wounded man walked forward together, deeper into the dark, toward whatever came next. And every step they took lit up the old world again, one piece at a time. The first thing she heard when she woke was his voice, not loud, not urgent, but steady, calm. He was speaking to someone. Maybe himself, maybe the shadows. She kept her eyes closed, listening, her breath slow. She was never a prize, he said. They bet her like an object, but she was always more. Something in his voice made her heart ache. He wasn't just angry, he was disappointed. She opened her eyes slowly and saw him standing near the broken wall. His back to her, his shirt torn again. Scars covered his body like stories written in flesh, some new, some older than the arena itself. She sat up slowly, careful not to speak. It was the first time she truly saw him outside a battle, without blood, without fire, just as he was. Not a monster, not a warrior, but something harder to define. Something almost human. He turned slightly, as if he sensed her watching. You should rest more, he said. Not facing her. I rested enough, she replied. You didn't sleep at all. I never do, he said quietly. Not since the first time I was betrayed. She stood and walked beside him, her bare feet silent. On the cracked floor, was it your people? She asked. He nodded once. They left me behind during a battle. Thought I was dead, he said. I wasn't. His hands clenched, then relaxed again. They never came back for me, so I stopped waiting. The silence that followed was heavy. She reached up and touched her collar, the glowing red light still there, pulsing like a weak heartbeat. I never had anyone come for me. She said softly, I was born in chains. They stood there together, not speaking. But something between them shifted. Not love, not yet, but understanding. Then a distant voice echoed through the halls, above loud, harsh, demanding, Lord? Verax had returned, and he wanted his property. Both of them. She looked at him, eyes wide. They'll come again, she whispered. They won't get past us, he replied. But you're still hurt, she said. You can't fight them. I don't have to, he said, then pointed to the wall behind her. There was something hidden there. Something old. She touched the stone, and a pulse moved under her fingers. The wall faded like smoke, revealing an old chamber behind it, lit with golden fire. Inside stood armor not for him. But for her, it was elegant, light-shaped for her body, and glowing with the same strange power now flowing through her veins. Her hands shook as she reached for it. I don't know if I can wear this, she whispered. You already are, he said. It was never the armor that made you strong. She stepped inside the chamber, and the armor wrapped around her like memory, like destiny. Each piece clicked into place, humming with energy, when she stepped out. Even the shadows seemed to pull. Away from her, he smiled faintly. Now they'll see what they gave up, he said. Outside, boots thundered down the hall. Voices shouting, weapons ready. She looked at him and whispered, Stay behind me this time. He didn't argue. When the doors exploded open, she was already moving. The first blast of energy hit her shoulder and bounced off. She leaped forward. Faster than before, every motion guided by something ancient and angry. The guards fell quickly, not dead, but afraid. One tried to run. But she grabbed him mid-air and threw him across the corridor. They had trained her to obey, to kneel, to fear. But now she had remembered something else. How to fight, and worse how. To lead, when the smoke cleared, she stood tall, glowing faintly. Her breath calm. He walked beside her, nodding slowly. They'll send more, she said. Good. He replied, Let them, at the far end of the city. Lord Verax watched through a crystal screen. His hand trembled as he watched the girl he once owned now turn toward his fortress. She's not supposed to be like that, he whispered. She was nothing, but he was wrong. She was everything. And now she was coming, not as a slave, but as something far more dangerous. As someone who remembered, and someone who had nothing left to fear. The city had stopped breathing. Shops closed, windows sealed, voices vanished into stone. Even the sky seemed to hold its light back, as if the stars themselves were watching in silence. At the far end of the Capitol Tower, Lord Verax stood alone in his throne chamber. He had once ruled this world with fire and fear, but now his guards had vanished. His allies refused to answer his calls, and his soldiers had started whispering a name that wasn't his. Not hers either. His face twisted with hate as he stared. At the cracked screen showing a single image, a silver figure walking calmly through the shattered gates. Armor glowing, hair rising like strands of light. Beside her walked a wounded man who no longer looked like prey. They didn't run, didn't hide, didn't slow down. They were coming for him. And he knew it. But still, he couldn't understand how. She had been just a girl, a slave, a thing he bought for less than a box of weapons. And that man, he had been half dead, thrown into the arena as a joke, but together. They had become something else, in the streets below. People began to emerge slowly from hiding. They whispered in soft voices. She's walking to the tower. He's with her. No one's ever reached that gate and lived. But they didn't come to watch them fall. They came because deep inside, something had changed in them too. The old fear had cracked, and something new had taken its place. Hope, the girl and the man reached the tower steps. No guards met them, only silence and old statues that had never seen a fight. She placed her hand on the door. It slid open without a sound. Inside, the walls were gold, polished but cold. At the end of the long hallway, Lord Varric stood waiting with a weapon in each hand. "You think you've won," he growled. "You think you're special." She said nothing. Her eyes didn't blink, didn't flinch. The man beside her took one step forward, then stopped. "This is her fight now," he said calmly. She moved like wind, not fast, not slow, just inevitable. Varric screamed and charged, firing both weapons. She didn't dodge. The energy blasts curved around her like the light itself was protecting her. He lunged with a blade, but she caught it with her bare hand. He stared in shock as the metal bent under her grip. "You called me nothing," she whispered. "But I am everything you feared." With one blow, she knocked the blade from his hand. With another, she dropped him to his knees. He reached for a hidden weapon, but her boot crushed it before he could grab it. "No more chains," she said. "No more cages. No more you." She looked back once. Toward the man, he nodded once, slowly. And she raised her hand. A pulse of golden light burst from her skin, surrounding the chamber. The mark on her collar flickered and died. All across the city, thousands of red slave lights turned off one by one. Freedom spread like fire through the wires, through the towers, through the sky. And the people cheered. Not loud at first, just soft, like a new heartbeat, then louder, louder. Until the whole city was singing, she stood in silence, the chains now broken not just from her neck, but from every neck. Varric lay unconscious, beaten but breathing. She didn't kill him. She didn't need to, because the world he ruled no longer existed. Later, as the sun finally rose for the first time in days, the man stood with her at the highest balcony. Crowds filled the streets, faces upturned. They didn't chant her name or his. They just stared at possibility, at change. She looked at him and said softly, "It's over." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No," he said. "This is just the beginning, and somewhere far beyond the stars." In places still dark with silence, other old bloodlines stirred. Other forgotten lights blinked to life, and the universe began to whisper again. About the human who refused to fall, and the slave girl who remembered who she truly was. And how together they changed everything forever.